Only 45% for most diesels. There's a possibility because of design, engineering, materials, of 55% or more increase in efficiency. Gasoline is about 30%, and that's like getting towards the max efficiency of the gasoline engine. We all know this kind of stuff. Running any vehicle without modification. Biodiesel will. How many people have had biodiesel issues after your first couple of tankfuls, like filters plugging, hoses, stuff like that? Boy, only a couple? Okay, there we go. That's more like it. Yeah, it's typical, but how many people have run it in a brand new car? And you've had issues with the biodiesel?
No issues with that.
That's what I thought. A lot of the issues that we're seeing with vehicles are due to being 20 and more years old. This is one of my own cars. It's an '84 Mercedes, and you know, it's got some years on it, and years on the hoses and such, and a lot of petroleum fuel has gone through it. This thing has 320,000 miles on it. So a lot of the issues we're seeing are not directly related to biodiesel, but what biodiesel is doing to old materials. Yes, sir?
I wanted to comment that my Volkswagen dealer in our town in Austin really doesn't like biodiesel because they've had a ton of problems, specifically with 2004 and later TDIs. He said they've had no trouble with 2003 and below, but the 2004 pump-induced engines, they've had tons of clogged filters and injectors that have had to be replaced. He really despises biodiesel because of that. He has a diesel himself, doesn't use biodiesel because it's a 2004 and later. And
yeah.
He doesn't feel like it works with those. And I'm having a really hard time trying to get him on our side to see what we're doing and using good fuel and all that stuff.
Right.
But the 2004 and later TDI is a different.
You might ask him if you could get a sample of this fuel next time they get a car in that they think is a specific biodiesel related issue. Because of the 10% of the vehicles out there that could be a biodiesel related issue, because a lot of issues are blamed on biodiesel that really are more age related issues. But of the 10%, probably half or more are because of bad fuel. And glycerol still in the fuel, soaps, stuff like that. Yes, sir?
We sell to a number of people with the 2004. One of my employees has the 2004, and we've had no problems at all. But they do have a problem with the pump-induced lift pump. It's a problem that some will and some won't admit, and they fail. And a lot of dealers are blaming it on biodiesel.
I have worked on a wagon, a diesel wagon, and I think it was a 2005. And that we narrowed it down to that, to the pump in the tank. Yeah, and it could be seals in that pump, because I did notice that the seals in that pump in the tank. How many people have a later model VW like that? Maybe just a couple? Okay. Be aware of that. Those little seals on that lift pump that's in the tank can be eaten up with biodiesel. Most of the other components are compatible, PVC lines and stuff like that. Okay. Common problems running owner-affected repairs can minimize these problems. Probably a lot of us are in this class because we work on our own cars. How many people don't plan to work on their own cars? Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to. Yeah, has everybody seen this? This guy put 4.6 million kilometers on this 114, 115 body Mercedes. I have one that doesn't look as nice as that. It's rusted through, but drivetrain. Okay. This is Nori Hayes from Boulder Biodiesel from way back. She was the secretary when Boulder Biodiesel first started, working on her station wagon in my driveway. And this is kind of what most of us are going to get to. We're going to be doing our own maintenance and stuff. The typical maintenance we're going to see is fuel filters. That's number one, especially to get a newer, well, not a new car, but a new to you used car, an old Mercedes, old Volkswagen. The likelihood is high you're going to be changing filters, at least a couple of filters. My 220, like the one in the picture on the previous slide, it had 200,000 miles on it, and I think I did one filter change, and I've run B100 in the thing. It's my summer car. It doesn't have a heater or air conditioning like that, but I probably put 20,000 miles with B100 through it, and maybe one filter change. Yeah.
Tom, I run a Power Stroke, and when I pull my filter, what should it look like?
You're probably not going to see Well, actually, I have some slides here later on that show some things that come out of filters that we see.
The last couple of times I pulled mine, it looked like it was doomed.
Yeah, you could pour the fuel out, and the fuel looks fine.
Yeah.
But in the newer type pleated filters, canister filters, you're not going to see what it traps.
Because it's inside.
Yeah. And if it's a newer Power Stroke, it's probably not going to trap a whole lot. If you have less than a couple 100,000 miles on it, you're probably not going to have a lot of that petroleum crap built up. So, unless you have algae issues. Filler cap gaskets, see that a lot on Mercedes. Filler neck seals, see that a lot. Pump fittings with seals, we don't see too many pump issues with Mercedes pumps. They're pretty bulletproof. Same thing with the Volkswagen pumps, but the odd thing is, I have a couple of Volkswagens, and nary an issue, V100 on the things. And then other customers, they'll replace a pump, and then after that, it's almost like somebody's rebuilding pumps out there with substandard seals, Butane or rubber, nitrile, something like that. That's not Biodiesel compatible, because then they just constantly have problems with pumps. So be aware of that. If you go to a rebuilt pump, consider that may be an issue. You may run into seals that decompose. Injector cleaning, you may have to deal with cleaning your injectors if you have cooking issues. If you do your own home brew and there's soap still left in there or glycerol, Miss Jocelyn, a young woman that worked with us last summer, in fact, she's working on my engine on my 300D there. It's rod bearings were scored up. We pushed the thing. The pumps turned out in a different turbo, and we pushed the thing pretty hard. So it go, it can go through parts. But the Mercedes engines are pretty stout motors. They do a lot to them. But be prepared to get greasy. That's working on a diesel, and just learn to enjoy that. Okay, common repairs. This is a pump seal that's starting to decompose. It was run on biodiesel. These all natural rubber, nitrile, butane seals, they decompose in biodiesel. Of course, we all know Viton. Go ahead and grab a chair or something, guys. We all know Viton is supposed to be compatible, but some of the Viton hoses use a sheath that's not compatible. I'll show you a picture of some Viton hose that has a sheath that's kind of starting to come apart already. The older fuel hoses, again, a lot of the issues that people see are on the older cars, the older line. It's already starting to come apart, decompose, dry up, and so they have some issues. I haven't, the newer Mercedes line that you get by the dealership, that has Mercedes symbol on it, I haven't had a problem with. It seems to be compatible. And most vehicles after 95 or so, my 92 Dodge Ram has PVC lines, hasn't had an issue with biodiesel stuff or the pump. So most of the newer vehicles, not going to have a problem with. It's the older stuff, Volkswagens, Mercedes, Volvos. So,
can I ask you a quick question? What do you guys do with the cigar hose?
Leave it alone.
Just leave it alone?
I've never seen a cigar. Well, no, I can't say that. In fact, I have a picture. Darn, I meant to put that on you.
Yeah.
One that I've seen, but it's because the clamps were loose, and it allowed the biodiesel to seep out, and it went in between the layers.
Oh, and that's where it got screwed up.
The inner layer seems to be pretty good. I mean,
but see, I changed it to Viton, and I got this horrible tapping noise.
Cigar hose is a fattened hose. What it does is it modifies the resonant frequency of the fuel. It's a return line from the pump.
Back into the tank.
Yeah, back into the tank. It goes back to the tank, and that's the hose that looks like it's swollen out. And a lot of people come up and say, "Oh, this hose is about to blow up."
Yeah, that's what I thought when I first bought it.
Yeah, everybody does.
Yeah.
It's not.
But I ended up going back to my original hose, and it hasn't gone bad. I've only got a couple thousand miles on it.
Your original cigar hose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
oh, and if anybody takes some digital pictures, if you could send them to me, I'm going to be going overseas here doing some classes and stuff. So it'd be nice to have something to say that I've done this. But yeah, cigar hose on a Mercedes specifically. It was designed to be expanded. It looks like a hose that's blowing up. kind of like a chamber, like resonant chamber in a two-stroke exhaust. It just modifies the pulses, so you don't feel them. People will put a solid line on there and they're like, I feel this. There's this weird pulse. Yeah, and that's why. And they put the cigar hose back on and they're fine. So, yeah, most vehicles after 92, okay, as is. Again, you'll have the little stub hoses from the PVC to filters and stuff like that you may have to replace. And read some of these quotes. You know, I've stolen from everywhere. And just wherever I see something that probably makes sense, I put it in here. Gates here in Denver. I don't know if you got, what I need to do is put this PDF up on my Colorado Biodiesel website. But they now say that the 4219D and 4219G somewhere up here. 4219 Gates, customers can use 4219G or XL, 30R7. Look for 30R7, Napa sells it. Fuel lines for biodiesel applications. Okay, but they claim it's 100% compatible, or close there too. Here's some 4219, in fact, if you want to pass this around, here's a piece of the Gates 4219G. That's supposed to be 100% compatible with biodiesel. But I have seen some issues with it. Here we go. Here's a piece of Viton line. And the inner sheath is Viton. Okay? It's like this is on my own Jetta. It's when a hose clamp loosens up and allows, if you look at this hose, you'll see two different, you'll see an inside, diameter of material, and then some support, and then an outside. And the outside is a different material than the inside. The inside seems to be compatible. It's the outside that starts to goo. Anybody seen that? I mean, I'm sure, how many people haven't seen this black goo? Yeah. I mean, that's going to be common in older cars. You're going to see black goo in anything that has rubber component. Okay, filter plugging for the first few tanks is what we tell people, and don't be afraid of changing the filters. It's not bad for the motor, and it's cleaning crap out, and they'll be happy because they actually did some kind of maintenance to their vehicle. And I recommend doing that before you see this thing black. We have people come and they're like, I don't know, it's powerless and smoking a lot, stuff like that, and you see these things are just about totally plugged up. And these are like 50 micron. These guys are 7. So, if these are plugged up with 50, this guy's going to be plugged up too. But that's probably the most common thing that you're going to have to deal with. Here's, this is out of, I don't know, how many people know Aaron Scott from Motor Earth, with diesel motorcycles? Yeah. This is out of his Nissan truck. He has a Nissan diesel truck. And we couldn't figure out why. We finally had to take the tank out, go have it boiled and coated inside. And then he hasn't had this issue. But man, he was replacing these filters once a week. And crap, there was rust and goo and from 200,000 plus miles of running petroleum. And boats, sailboats, they used to work on sailboat motors. Boy, they get a lot of crap because they're running algae and everything else. Which reminds me, in fact, maybe I'll say that now. If you picked up a new vehicle, one of the first things we do when we get a new car in the shop, for whatever, doesn't matter what it is, we'll dose it with some biocide, some algicide.
What do you recommend?
Valve Tech, good stuff. But BioGuard, Power Service makes a BioGuard that works well too. Use that in sailboats and stuff. But be prepared when you do shock it. Give it a shock treatment, like double what the label says for the algicide when you first get a vehicle. And that usually keeps it from going any further than that. We've seen pretty bad, black goo stuff come out of some vehicles that have been at the coast or humid atmospheres, out near the sea. But,
so that's just a good thing to do all the time?
That's just a good thing, yeah. I do it just so that the customer doesn't have that issue later on.
But how often should you do this?
About once a year. Unless you do have algae problems.
Okay.
And if you're having repeated algae problems, you better look at your fuel source. That's usually, it's coming from getting water in your fuel some way.
How do you tell if you have an algae problem? Your filters?
Yeah, you're gonna see black, slippery crap come through your filter. It's really, it's a gooey stuff. Kind of like it's not as sticky as when a rubber decomposes. But, yeah, Rocky Mountain Biodiesel had that in their tanks, their plastic tanks, because how many are into home brewing? Like beer, that kind of thing? How many people use plastic fermenters and stuff? Well, you know the issue is when you scratch the plastic, you just almost can never get that disinfected. You can soak it in bleach solution, whatever, for however long you want. I still use the plastic fermenters and stuff, but they had, these huge plastic tanks, and once they got algae in them, they weren't getting in it, so they had to use algicide from then on in all their fuel. And most places are going to see that issue with the bigger plants at some point. Here, kind of hard to see because of the reflection, but typical black goo, you have some venting out of the cap, and then it, biodiesel vapors and stuff come down, a little bit trickles down, and it just eats these rubber seals up. I've replaced these in a car, and then 6 months later they look like this again. And they're just never going to make these seals in another material than what they make. Why make for a 20, 30-year-old Mercedes? Why retool a part?
Where do you get those?
There was a Mercedes Source, I think it was, that was selling the gas cap seals made out of a different material.
Yeah,
It was
I do. Yeah, I get a cap seal made out of a PVC blend. It's a blue seal instead of black rubber.
Yeah.
And I usually will put those in caps, but this seal right here,
okay.
this tank's cap, nobody's going to retool for that. Yeah.
Where do you get, that's what my question is, where can I get those? Because we do see that all the time.
Yeah, Mercedes dealer or importedcarparts.com. They're pretty good. A guy named Clint at Imported Car Parts. He's out on the West Coast, and they're reasonably priced. If you do over $100 order, it's free shipping. They're fast. They usually have parts in stock, and they have a lot of Mercedes parts.
Is there also I thought there was a fuel line underneath the car that goes from the tank, like the tank connects to a fuel line?
Yeah, there was a little stub hose, and that's usually a crimped connection, goes into the tank, has a fitting, and then it comes out and then hooks to the fuel line and goes. And then there's the return, flex line return. We usually end up replacing that with a, I think that is an NPT thread that goes into the tank, and we'll put a bar fitting there and run this 4219G line on both of those. But that crimped fitting also has barb.
Yeah, if you
take
trim
that
that off.
Yeah, you can cut out the rubber off of that crimped fitting, and there's a barb in there, and you can use that.
You're talking about around the tank itself, underneath the car?
Yeah, coming out of the tank to the feed line and the return line. Actually, there's two different vent and return comes back, and those will replace with 4219G. Okay.
Is there anything wrong with that screen in the tank plugging?
One with an algae issue that we pulled out, and it was like, you look at this thing, oh man, this is cool. And
Other than that, not moving?
yeah, generally not. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
unless it's been corroded, rusted. Cars that sit for years out in farm fields, you may end up with that after a couple of tankfuls, and all that crud starts getting mobile and moving around, and plug that thing up. And then I recommend people pull off their first aid kit, unscrew that, take the ring off of the float cinder, take the float cinder out, take that filter hole assembly off the bottom, and then power wash the inside of the tank best they can, let it dry for a couple of days. So put a hairdryer in there and just leave it on. Yeah.
Are you going to get to the newer vehicles also? Are you going to have to?
I will, but if you have specific questions, you should ask them as
No,
we're
I'm
going
just,
through.
my general, probably the big one is the GM diesel. Are there problems with the GM diesel? And when you get to that,
Yeah, I mean, I'm a GM, I would pick a GM over Ford, except for the diesel, not the diesel motors. The 6.5 natural, you know, the natural aspirated, I mean, the 6.0 natural aspirated, or 6.2, good motor.
But not the new Isuzu motor.
Well, no, the new Isuzu motor, we did 4 veg-oil conversions on them.
Well, I'm sorry, I meant the GM new V8.
The Duramax.
Oh, okay, the Duramax,
Duramax.
yeah, right, the Isuzu design.
Okay.
That's been a pretty good motor.
Which motor were you talking about?
I was talking about like the 6.5. That's the
Oh,
one
okay.
that people-
You don't like those at all?
No, I don't like those.
But it's the
Replace the pump
new
and keep
stuff.
replacing pumps.
That's not a good motor on regular.
Yeah, we've just seen so many people come with, you know, because they get a deal on a truck, you know, Suburban that's diesel. Man, that's a cool vehicle. But, man. it's
Well, I
just
was
like-
just Chevrolet trying to keep up with the 604. And that, you know, 604 is a dismal failure too. So, that's just Chevrolet trying to.
6.9 is a good motor. Anyway, this is out of a Power Stroke. This is one of their high pressure injectors, and this injector coking. This was, I think, about 30,000 miles on this truck, and it had O-ring issues, but the O-ring issues were more related to the bad O-ring design on the Power Stroke. And we went through 5 different design changes on those O-rings.
7.3 Power Stroke or 6.0?
7.3 Power Stroke, yeah.
What year?
96. Yeah. So we all know this stuff, right? So, but so these were replaced because of the O-rings, but I did notice some coking on the nozzles, but all of the holes were clear, so that's cool. And you're going to have some coking no matter what fuel you use, and with biodiesel, it is more carbon. As far as the coking, it's almost 10% carbon. Whereas with petroleum diesel, coking is actually worse because it has some calcium components, other minerals that build up. You know, I'm sure you've seen valves. I meant to bring a valve. There's really coked up with this hard calcium and carbon deposits that you can't hardly scrape off. At least with the carbon coking, you know, with biodiesel, it's it'll come off and.
So you can clean it then? That was a question I was going to ask. You can clean the coking off again?
Yeah, yeah. I use an ultrasonic cleaner on home apart. Here's out of the same truck. It had leaking O-rings, and you can see here it started to hit and corrode. But you know, the typical symptoms of coking are symptoms of a lot of different things. Bad fuel can cause this. Smoking, hard starting, lack power, rough engine.
Rough engine at idle or at speed or both?
Rough engine at idle usually.
Because I have that problem.
Do you?
I have a
I just
6
shoot it
liter.
and get it over with.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's a 6 liter 03 Power Stroke.
Okay. Yeah. This is what I recommend people use as a commute vehicle. You know, we all know this kind of stuff. You know, some of these slides were from the presentation. Yeah.
Most people talk about how the cetane is higher for biodiesel, 55 versus 48. What?
48? Where are you getting your fuels? More like
42.
44, 45, yeah, 42.
Yeah,
Down near the coast, it's going to be
Well, my point is, if biodiesel has less BTUs per gallon than diesel fuel, what is the cetane giving us? What? And if I tell somebody biodiesel has better cetane than regular diesel, what can they expect as an advantage from that?
better combustion. You know, what the cetane. I can't, you know, totally answer this up to high level, but similar to octane in gasoline vehicle, higher octane doesn't mean that it burns faster. It actually means that it burns slower. So it's a longer burn cycle. You know, it's a longer burn. So more through the engine cycle, you're creating these combustive gases instead of a quick, detonation like like a 12-to-1 compression gasoline engine and you try to pump gas in it, it's going to detonate. And what the detonation is the fuel detonating or exploding instead of a controlled, slower burn that pushes longer through the cycle. And so that's what biodiesel, it actually burns, since its flash point is higher, part of the reason why, but it pushes more through the cycle of the engine. Instead of, like, petroleum diesel will burn faster and give less expansive gases to the motor. Now theoretically you'd say, well then it should be, you should get more power out of it. Well, it's a trade-off, because in some ways you do get, you know, it's smoother because it doesn't do that, the quick hammer. Yeah, that's part of the reason why you don't hear that tink, 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 that hammering, you know, like a ball peen hammer on a piece of steel, is that it's burning slower over a longer period, but it doesn't peak at the temperature that petroleum diesel peaks at. So the expansion is longer, not as total overall.
So the advantage for the user, higher cetane, you're saying mostly it's quieter.
Well, that it's quieter, that it burns more complete.
But the advantage of burning more complete is?
Well, emissions. That's, you know, and that's a principal advantage that most people are using biodiesel, right?
So having a higher cetane means that they're going to have lower emissions.
Not necessarily, but that's how it works with biodiesel, right? And it's not because of the cetane that it has lower emissions, but that's part of the reason. The higher cetane, the longer burning curve, so it's a more complete burn. Instead of a quick flash, and it leaves some uncombusted fuel that goes out the exhaust, like you'd see with petroleum. I see a lot with gasoline. So I don't know how else to answer that. Anybody have any insight on this? Yeah.
A lot of people think, well, there's a lot of information out there, and the non-biodiesel crowd will go, oh, it's lower BTU, so I get worse mileage. And it's lower BTU, so I won't pay as much because it's watered down, so to speak. But what I've had the understanding of is that it contains oxygen, like 10 to 11% oxygen.
In itself.
That oxygen is not BTU, it's not energy to be used, but that oxygen helps complete the process. So we find like B50 gives us the best mileage, where we still gain mileage at B100. But B50, because we get the advantage of a little bit more BTU from diesel, the oxygen promotes that combustion process, the completion more, and so we end up getting better mileage. And the oil companies will say, oh, well, you get less horsepower, but they don't mention you get more torque. Diesels don't run at 8,000 RPM, you want torque. So our customers always see increase of mileage. We get, like in a power stroke or something, we'll get 50 to 100, so 30 to 60 more miles to a tank full for a guy running B100. And the heavier the load, the better the percentage increases over the diesel counterpart.
Distance, yeah.
Regardless, the cetane's better.
And that's where the torque comes from, is the longer torque curve, you know, the longer combustion.
It's burning more.
It's not been my experience to be getting better mileage.
It isn't mine either, but
Especially on the load.
all of my vehicles,
I mean-
the throttle is on and off. And
Yeah, I mean, my experience has been, you know, you're gonna lose. You know, like my wife's Jeep Liberty, for example, 2930, we throw regular diesel in it, it'll pop up to 33, 34. Consistently. In other words,
Yeah.
whenever we...
everybody's vehicle is different. I mean, I have customers that run, like the bigger Mercedes, the heavy ones, and this goes along with like towing loads, you know, and that's where torque comes in. Heavier vehicles really benefit more from it. Like people with the older Mercedes SDs, they'll get 28 on biodiesel and 29 on pump diesel, or they'll get, well, like one guy gets 32 on biodiesel and he gets 30 on pump diesel, so D2s. Yeah.
On biotrucker.com, there are a whole bunch of truckers that are using like small stuff, you know, and they have a bunch of testimonials about getting better gas mileage, just so if you guys are interested in looking at what they have to say about.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and it's, are we here for the mileage? And really, if you look at it, it's just easier to pull up to a pump your gas and go, instead of spending our time making fuel. If you look at the time we spend making fuel, our fuel costs us $5 a gallon. So, but we do it for other reasons.
Well, we have a lot, a lot of us have to sell this to people, and so I've called construction companies and said, have you guys started using any biodiesel? And I've had the question, and it's a very fair question. Most people say that biodiesel on a really heavy construction equipment gets much less power and less fuel economy. I think we had a conference, it was a fleet manager conference, and those fleet managers said the same thing. Like the really big stuff that are doing mining operations, they lost so much power they had to stop using it.
Yeah.
Someone else stood up and said they thought it was bad fuel, and they didn't have that problem. So it seems like there's still quality issues of some plaguing us.
Yeah, we had that here in Colorado with, working on biodiesel before Bob Orangehout took over there. The Air Force Base in the Springs was using quite a large amount of biodiesel in their equipment, and they had to stop because of the quality issues. They thought they blamed biodiesel, and they were right, but it was because of soaps and not fully reactive fuels. Okay, did everybody read this? Well, I'm not going to read this stuff to people, but you can read it while we talk and discuss things. Everybody got that? It's where is it? It's on one of the websites. Common biodiesel website. Showing about a 50% reduction in particulate matter or soot emissions. And remember, oil life is extended, and so is engine life when you have less soot entrained in oil. Substantial increase in pump fuel lubricity. We've all heard this, right? That even a 2% biodiesel, and then I think that's why a lot of the states are going to B2 is to replace the sulfur component, which was another component in the coking that you used to see with petroleum diesel that really caused some problems. So these I stole off a website. Is this anybody here the Trouts?
Well, I'm sorry, before you move on from the lubricity issue.
Too late.
One of the things that we've heard a lot about is going back and forth between ultra-low sulfur diesel and high blend causes the seals to swell with biodiesel and then shrink and crack with ultra-low. And we have an injection rebuild company right up the street from us. They've had a ton of people come in with ultra-low sulfur diesel. They're having to rebuild their injector pumps. And kind of through the grapevine, we've heard swells with biodiesel, shrinks, and then cracks with ultra-low. So going back and forth is a bad idea.
Right.
It's better to keep it.
Well, the ultra-low sulfur diesel causes the problems independent of whether you run biodiesel or not.
Well,
We're
we're
seeing
saying it's worse because the biodiesel swells
right,
the seals.
and then, but
So when I have customers who come in from out of town, like, yeah, I'd like to fill up with B99. It's okay to go back and forth between ultra-low, right, when I'm out of the country. And lately I'm sort of hesitating and saying, well, there are some problems if you use a full tank of bio and then you're going to go back and use a full tank of ultra-low. You could cause problems with your injector pump. The seals cracking.
we've seen problems with the injector pumps that have been run on ultra-low sulfur diesel that were run on pump diesel. They have never seen biodiesel. So the ultra-low sulfur diesel is causing its own issues now.
So it sounds like it's a good idea to tell people, if you're not going to use any biodiesel because you don't have it available, take a 5-gallon tank home, with you and blend a little
Always
bit.
blend
Then
some
you're at least at
biodiesel.
B2.
Yeah.
There's also a piece about using ULSD and switching back and forth biodiesel in the magazine. Actually, there's a column called Ask the Wrench Wench, and Rachel Burton writes responses to people's questions. Someone's already about it. She recommends a couple of websites where you can get the ones with Diesel Geek. You can
Yeah,
get
they're an awesome.
specific kits for things like that.
Kit, what's the kit?
A kit for an injector pump with appropriate compatible materials.
Of course, you have to pull your pump out and rebuild it. As long as you don't have to time it, that's fine. Getting a bench to time a pump, so it costs you $20.
Just a quick note on who that was. Your dad?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
Bob.
Or,
The Trout says Bob Armentrout.
oh, okay. I thought, I meant to ask him, but that's good, because now I can tell him, hey, I stole your material.
That's Bob.
I figured because there's the trouts. That's kind of... Anyway, and that was his car on Maui, I guess, and the one that he has now, the little Volkswagen. Anyway, this was his stuff. He had these pictures in. That makes sense because he had these pictures of it in Rocky Mountain Biodiesel. Does everybody know who Barb Armantrout is? He from Rocky Mountain Biodiesel, great guy, good speaker. What is he teaching? He's teaching something.
Quality.
Quality stuff.
Quality and then business stuff.
He's going to do, this afternoon in our next session, Biodiesel Sustainable Solution or Dead End Street. He's going to give a great overview about all of it. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, really good guy. You know, he's not in it for, he's in it for all the right reasons. And I guess he went down to Austin.
He's in Dallas now.
Is he in Dallas?
Yeah.
Oh. So, yeah, I kind of miss him and his wife. They're good people. Okay. Somebody likes us. You look up biodiesel and you get the good and the bad, you know, on websites and stuff. But this is on answer.com online the other day, and I saw this and thought, damn, that's nice to see some, you know, one of the major players. But, you know, as we get more, as biodiesel becomes more high profile, we're going to see more stuff like it's going to destroy your car, it's going to blow your engine up, you know, it's going to kill your family and all that stuff. Oh, wow. This is another PowerPoint. The one I had on my computer that's not working had a bunch more slides. But anyway, so the issues you're going to see principally, I'm going to go over some. Oh, by the way, here's an injector that's kind of dirty, but this is typically what you're going to see with the Mercedes injector. It's unscrewed, but it could have a little bit of diesel fuel in it. So you can unscrew it and whatever, look at the components, or maybe we'll do that afterwards. But this is a typical injector you're going to see after. That's probably about 140,000 miles on there. 140,000. And I'll send another nozzle around. You know, stuff wears in a diesel engine. That's just how it works. And injector nozzles, especially in Volkswagens, Mercedes, they're fairly easy to replace. You should balance your set when you're done, you know, or have it balanced by somebody. And definitely replace your heat shields. The heat shield sets in the bottom of the pre-chamber. The injector goes in, and what the heat shield does is it's kind of a crushing metal seal, and it allows heat from the injector nozzle tip to not radiate up into the nozzle, but to go to, so it touches, it's a seal here, seals onto the bottom end. You can see the little round circle, and which coincides with the circle inside the heat shield. And that transmits the heat to the head, and you know, and of course out through the cooling jacket. What happens if you don't replace that heat seal, that shield, is you get stuff like that. You know, this injector is coked up on the outside because this seal wasn't sealing against this injector, and then also overheat this nozzle. So you can come up and, you know, when you're done here, come up and play with parts and stuff. I didn't bring too many parts. I normally do because people like to play with stuff. And I'll show you how an injector lays out and why and everything if people want to know. But you know, with biodiesel, I've seen more. They actually will clean up more than coca, unless it's not fully reacted fuel. We have, oh no, that's in the cold weather. I'll be doing a cold weather presentation thing tomorrow. We see a lot of cold weather issues with biodiesel here in Colorado. And there's a guy that sells fuel here that's, oh, I need to put one of that on a slide. He did a quote saying, "We've now come up with a anti-gel that you can run by B100 year-round. You know, we've finally done this, and it's good down to -36. How many people in this world, in Europe, across this world, are trying to come up with an anti-gel that you can get down to plus 20 B100? How many people have run B100 below 32? Okay, heated systems at all?
Nope.
Oh, I meant to do that. Hey, I did. Well, that'll in the cold weather thing tomorrow, we'll talk about
I got 5 degrees.
moderately heated systems.
Sorry,
for
I
biodiesel.
started joking.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask what your suggestions are for dealing when you do get bad fuel and your tanks have bad fuel in it. For example, we had a load of bad fuel that probably had 1,000 gallons in 50 different cars out there. And we had hard starts and TDIs, we had clogged fuel filters, and I imagine there's probably 50 cars driving around with a little bit of glycerin in the tanks right now. And according to the dealer, that's all eventually going to come out of the injectors, and they're probably going to have to change several customers' complete injectors for $4,000. So
Maybe, I mean, when you're running SVO, you're burning a glycerin component in the hydrocarbon,
so we can burn through them. I guess the crux of my question is, when people have crud in there from petroleum, they say put biodiesel through it, that'll clean it out. But when you have biodiesel crud, what do you clean that out with?
What you clean that out? Oh,
People
actually,
say put in a tank of diesel, but why?
here's a couple of options. When you have that issue, Power Service, I'm not a pimp for Power Service, but their products are pretty good.
Power Service is the name of the company?
Yeah, Power Service is the name of the company, and they sell a product called Diesel Fuel Supplement. You've probably seen that in the white bottle. But more importantly, the Diesel Clean works really well for that kind of thing. It'll help remove water. It even has a mild anti-gel ability to it. But that's one way. That's the cheap and easy, quick, hopefully it'll fix it kind of way to do it. The other thing is draining the tank.
How do you recommend doing that? Never been able to do it.
Just shoot a hole in it, it works. A number, like if you have a Mercedes, that's pretty straightforward. Go unscrew that little stub hose at the tank, bottom of the tank. And then, and I'd recommend pulling that filter out too, because it doesn't, it'll leave half an inch of fuel across the tank. It doesn't, so pulling the screen filter out is a large nut kind of thing. Pull that down and out. I'd recommend replacing that O-ring with the Viton, at least you can get Viton and O-rings.
Volkswagen.
Yeah, Volkswagens, you might have to pump it out, and put some, pump it out, then run some petroleum diesel in there with Diesel Clean, which will help entrain some of that crap in the fuel, and then pump that out. So up at the filter, I don't know how to go back, but the Volkswagen filter, backspace?
But how do you?
That makes too
clean
much
it out?
sense. I can't do that.
And it has an anti-cycling tank, so you stick the tube down there and you can stop.
Well, you could do that, but what I usually do is I'll hook up a small electric fuel pump to the
Fuel out line?
yeah, right at the fuel, right here.
Okay.
This is the in. This is return. So this is in. That goes to the engine. This is return. Goes back to the tank. So take this guy off. Hook up a fuel pump. Out into a 5-gallon jug.
How much stuff do you think will be left? Because what I'm worried about is the stuff at the very, very bottom.
Right, and that's why I say pump it out until you dry, and then dump in a gallon of petroleum with a high concentration of the Diesel Clean,
Okay.
which will help entrain that stuff into that fuel and then pump that out. Somebody else here? Yeah.
We've had the problem with unreacted oils in the biodiesel, and we don't see the problem this time of year. And we go into the fall and everything's great, and we'll have a cold night with our outside tank, and our filter's plugged. And we haven't even added fuel to it. Yesterday we pumped, 200 liters. Today we could do 2 or 3 liters and we can't get fuel through it. But it seems that the oils, of course, gel up first, and if we filter enough through our 2 different tanks, we can actually catch that oil before it goes out of our retail pump and into our customer's car. We did have a couple customers that had gelled filters from this unprocessed oil, but most of it we caught. Well, we just buy a case of, well, we hopefully have the problem solved now. But yeah, last year we'd buy a case of these filters, and we would catch it all. And the customer wouldn't actually get any of this basically raw oil at, you know, whatever temperature we were starting to blend it at. We never had any problem with our customers beyond the filter change. And once they got into good fuel and
Didn't they
ran
have
it,
the cold issues?
it just cleaned out and it was done. And it seemed to be a very small amount, but it would act like a big problem. And we've heard a lot of scare tactics, or, oh, if you've got unprocessed oils in your fuel tank, you gotta drain your tank and replace your injectors, and it's gonna wreck your engine and blah, blah, blah. But we've never had that.
Well, no, I mean, think about it, you know, people run SVO, but if you're properly running SVO, you're heating the oil up to 160 to 180 to come up with the same viscosity as petroleum. Otherwise, you're going to destroy your pump. So, you know, effectually, since the oil is not, or since the biodiesel is not hot, since it's not heated because it's biodiesel, you don't need to heat it.
Yeah.
But it's acting a little bit like SVO because it has some unreacted vegetable oil in there, still has glycerin.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah, the free glycerin too, that if there's a high free glycerin content, you find that accumulates in the fuel filter, so if you get a cold snap, then it'll plug the fuel filter right out.
Right there,
Yeah.
yeah.
I have some cool pictures of, like my 220 is my summer car, and I run it on B100 year round. Well, not year round because in the wintertime it just sits there, but cool pictures of it, of the filter, the goldenrod that has the clear housing that you can see in, and really kind of cheesy stuff. It's really cool. It's not going anywhere. It's like, yeah.
Hello.
Go.
I have a question. Why does, maybe it's an easy answer, but why, as the filter clogs, does your mileage really go down? I mean, is the fuel...
Wait a minute, repeat that. Why does the filter clog when?
Why does the mileage go down as the filter clogs? I mean, you really, your miles per gallon really drop? Like, is it because there's a vacuum created and you're...
Oh, yeah.
You'll see more fuel to do less work somehow.
Right. No, it's more work, right? When you have a filter clogged.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you'll see smoking issue, a lot of smoking issues. You'll be sucking oil, cast rings, and stuff like that.
So it's not as complete a burn?
Yeah, it's not a complete burn because you're too high. You're way past stoic. You have way too much air
gotcha.
for the combustion. Yeah.
Okay, Quinn, again, to go back to the newer engines that are out there. I mean, there's heavy equipment out there that are high pressurizing the fuel.
Yeah.
Just,
PSI, yeah.
I mean, phenomenal amounts.
So flocculation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
that,
and
you know, that was an issue, but you that was the thing with the Air Force Base down in the Springs. They were once the largest buyer of biodiesel in the state. They still use biodiesel, but that was the theory with their filter clogging problems, was the fuel was flocculating because of the extremely high pressures. What we found is extremely high pressures is moderately relevant only if the fuel is not a fully reactive fuel. If you're less than 98, 99%,
okay.
you do get that.
Okay, so any engine out there running 100% bio, unless
Well, no, 100% bio is ASTM, 6751. We haven't seen that issue with it, if it truly meets spec.
Right. So any engine, including the GM Duramax or the new
Right.
Fords or Cummins, especially, their biodiesel will not give them any grief at all.
I'm going to say that is true, but I'm going to qualify that with saying biodiesel. All right.
Vegetable and blend.
I understand.
D6751.
I understand.
Not, homebrew with half soaps and glycerol and stuff still left in it, a few glycerol.
What about that point though? ASTM
doesn't address.
That point. So if you make something out of animal fats,
Right.
which gels.
See, that's a different issue than, yeah, but you know what?
And that'll give you a real issue at much higher temperatures.
Right, but that's a different issue than the high, that'll happen with getting across the board because of the gel point, the temperature, not the temperature. That's unrelated to the pressure of the injectors. I mean, that
We've-
probably doesn't help that whole.
No, it'd be worse.
We've had issues with the Ford engine. I guess the lift pump's not that strong in them or doesn't tolerate vacuum on the filter. And we'll have customers that come in, they just run diesel, they'll come in, we sell B100, they'll fill up, they might go through, they're usually contractors, so they're driving 6 to 1,000 miles a week. They'll go 3 weeks. They won't have changed their filter before they start, and their filter will be fairly dirty. The B100 will start to clean out their tank, but more so I think it liquefies what's in the filter and plugs the filter. The vacuum goes way up on the lift pump and blows up the lift pump, and depending on the legitimacy of the mechanic, it's between $750 and we've heard $2,000 to change that.
Yeah. Yep.
And the Ford will kill itself on a B100 because the person hasn't changed their filter. Now the Dodges, they seem to just get loaded up and will stall or hard to start,
Yeah.
but you can't kill a component there. But and you'll go for miles and miles before you ever have a problem too on the filter. But the GM, they've got a 2-micron filter on the Duramax. They had issues when they started, but it's only a 2-micron. So we'll have guys that fill up, put 1 or 2 tankfuls through, and out on the side of the road, I get a cell phone call, their truck just stopped.
Yeah.
Because it's like 2 instead of 10.
I meant to bring that, we recommend, especially with, like, we had a towing company up in Montana that had us do 16 trucks and the SVO kits. And we did Baldwin filters, frame mount filter heads on all of them. So we pre-filtered it down to 5 micron before it ever hit the engine. We haven't seen an issue. And it's year-round kits, so they're heated filters. And we'll go over the stuff tomorrow in the cold weather, biodiesel thing. To reiterate, the common problems you're going to see with biodiesel, which most everybody here knows, is fuel hoses, especially in the older cars. The newer cars, 92 and on, probably you're not going to see an issue, or if you do see an issue, it's going to be in the little stub hoses, the flex lines that go from like the tank to the PVC lines, and then from the PVC lines to your lift pump, which is an external lift pump, or from there to the fuel pump. Sometimes they'll have the PVC lines coming up on the frame rail, and then this flex line over to the pump. Those things, what I'd recommend, you pick up a new car, get some of this 4219G, put it on, use good stainless hose clamps, and probably not going to see an issue from that. And that's preventative maintenance as far as I'm concerned. It'll take you half an hour to replace just those flex lines. Time well spent. Filters, if you have the ability, I would recommend putting a filter head and a secondary filter in your system before you even get to your primary on your engine. Filter it down to like 5 microns. And a big filter like Mercedes filter is a pretty small filter for their primary filter, the 7 microns. You can put a fairly big filter on your frame rail somewhere or up in the engine department, and that'll save you a lot of headaches, because those you have to replace a 10th, the amount of times you have to replace this stock primary. Yeah.
What about those centrifuge filters?
Centrifugal filters? Yeah, I have 2 of them at home. I should have brought those. I usually bring a case of stuff to play with, but yeah, we tested them. I was in Delhi at the start of last year, and Aaron and I were working on a diesel motorcycle project, and we'll be back there this fall again. But we tested those filters at a lab in Delhi University, and they work. The problem is that you're not going to find one that's self-cleaning. So and the problem with filters is nobody wants to clean. They put a filter in and they go. So they do work for desooting oil. I was talking to John about playing with them to see about separating some of the glycerin. It's fuel as a fuel filter.
Right.
But what I'd recommend is if you make your own fuel, run a centrifugal filter maybe post-process.
Right. And that's what I was thinking
worry
about.
your fuel, rather than on board on your car,
Yeah.
But their centrifugal filters work, but you have to take them apart and clean all the crap that they you know, spin out and compress. They pack up against the side wall, and get taken apart, clean all crap out. But they do make smaller, you know, small enough ones to put in, or maybe some of those.
It's a good source of mileage.
Well, there's a couple of websites, places that sell them, but check Motor Earth soon here, and Aaron should have some up on the website pretty soon. So lines, filters. If you do have injector issues, email or call me. I do have, you know, I did make custom injectors at one point, and I'm going to stop doing that because it was a non-profit type thing. But you know, I can give you some advice on cleaning up your own injectors. But I do recommend that you have them balanced. I do still balance injectors for people, but
What's that cost approximately? Ballpark, what's that cost?
I usually like $20 an injector. But I take the injector apart, ultrasonically clean everything, and then put them back to it. If you don't want to replace the nozzle, usually people want a nozzle replace, you know, new nozzles, and balance to like plus or minus 2 bar. The spec on Mercedes motorcycles is like plus or minus 5 bar. It won't go 2 to 3 bar.
So you're talking strictly Mercedes, not like Carstokes or?
Well, Volkswagen, Mercedes, the older GM 62s, the older the 69 Ford IH motors. Power strokes, they take a different bit. Same thing with the high pressure Cummins injectors. I mean, I do the older Cummins injectors up to 98, but I don't have a tester for them. I'm not going to get a tester for them. It's not profitable to do that. Yeah.
We've got a 93 Dodge Cummins that has about 80,000 miles on it.
Wow, how did you manage that?
We got lucky.
Sitting there all the time?
Yeah, we only paid $7,000. So ever since we bought it, and even after 10 or 20,000 miles, it's mostly good E100, E99. It does a huge cloud of black smoke every time you start it.
And that's on
Yeah, even D100.
Have you played with the pump settings, the smoke screw, or anything like that?
Haven't done anything.
You might play with that.
What do you find? I'm not sure what's found.
I've dialed that in a little bit, but I still get large amounts of smoke when I start it up. And I mean, we'll let it warm up, light goes off, fire it on.
Still
Lots of smoke. But I have played with pump.
Yeah, part of it is, but it doesn't do that when it's warmed up, like you come out of the grocery store and you start it.
Always.
Does it?
Every time. I think the injectors, the gentleman that we bought it for, he said that he bought it from another gentleman that was farm and just sat for a while. So I'm thinking the injectors might just be dripping a little bit fuel. I don't know. I mean, if we can get that fixed, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Is that something that we can send to you to have the injectors rebuilt? Or?
Yeah, like up to 98.
Yeah. So I'm free, so something's wrong.
And I put a marine injector nozzle on it, gives you a little more power. So if you can play with your screw and pump a little bit, so the aneroid settings and stuff.
Right.
But usually that happens because the Cummins has the air intake heater instead of glow plugs, and it's not quite there, not quite enough. So the cold start, you're getting incomplete combustion. But it could be your housing. Have you replaced the turbine housing at all in the turbo, or is it the stock housing? Could be increased in the housing, big housing. Going with the smaller housing, you're going to get a faster spool up, more air, you know, on the initial low RPM, like startup RPM, a little better mix. But then you're going to lose it at the very top end, like if you're doing a lot of heavy towing. Yeah.
So we need utilities
But email me and we'll talk about that. Any questions on mechanical stuff that you're thinking? I know this class didn't cover like really in depth.
What's your email address?
I'm not. I'm killing. Just go to coloradobiodiesel.com or tom@coloradobiodiesel.com. Any slave at coloradobiodiesel.com. So
use the diesel purge.
I've used a diesel purge, but usually it's not, like a customer wants a diesel purge. For the time it takes me to hook up a diesel purge, and to do that, I can yank the injector lines, pull the injectors, take them apart, and get halfway through cleaning them. And I'd rather do that and rebalance the set, because more often than not, the balancing is off. And if I can directly clean the injector nozzles by take them apart, put them in the open shop cleaner, and don't mix up the pintles, by the way. You'll destroy your injector if you, this little piece of an injector is called a pintle. Here's the nozzle body, and these two are mated parts. They're precision machined to mate together. So if you pull a pintle out of one and put a pintle in the other, you might get it to fit, but it's never going to seal. It's only going to drip. They're always going to smoke. It's going to coke out. They're a match pair. If they get mixed up and you're like, oh, which one did this come from? Throw them away. And I have a ton of good, used nozzles. Usually I get nozzles. I'll clean them up. I'll polish the faces, and then they'll be good to go to replace in the set. They won't last as long as the newer. They'll last longer than the newer Indian-made Fox nozzles, but not the older German-made Fox. Yeah.
What's your turnaround time for the injector service? 'Cause if I mail you
6
one-
months, a year.
Yeah, we can have that downtime, no problem.
Unless you want to come to the house and use it, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a heck of a drive from Texas.
Yeah. Right now, I'm heading to Istanbul, and I'll be there for a couple of, and I'll be in India until probably the start of the year. But I'll have about a month's time between now and the end of the year that I'll be back, so I could theoretically do, injectors for people, but not one of those things, again, that's not profitable for me to do. I just do it to support the industry and support people. But if you know somebody who does such and such, find a good shop and call around. Any other questions?
If you have more, come up afterwards. We're ready for lunch. We'd like to thank our speaker for coming. It's now lunchtime, back over at the building, at the dining hall, until 1 o'clock. Make sure you're back here by 1. You got your schedule for the different discussions.